Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to Tuesday's first half kickoff edition of WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion that is posted on Tuesdays and Thursdays on WeAreSC.com and features WeAreSC columnists, staff writers, and historians. We first start off with the pregame show, where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC football news. Let's first meet Tuesday's panelists. WeAreSC columnist who writes WeAreSC.com's The Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways, in addition to regular season football and basketball practice reports. He also hosts his own podcast show entitled Locked On USC. Marc Kulkin, a former William Jewell College defensive back and WeAreSC columnist who writes the popular WeAreSC.com column Musings with Arledge, now has his own weekly WeAreSC.com video show, Musings with Arledge, and is a graduate of the USC Law School, Chris Arledge. And a weekly WeAreSC columnist who writes Fridays the Obvious and Not So Obvious, IMHO Sunday, and is an active member of the Football Writers Association of America, your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle, Greg Katz. Before we kick off this Tuesday's first half edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here is the latest USC football news. On Monday, 3 Trojans were named first-team Associated Press All-Americans. Those Trojans named were quarterback Caleb Williams, offensive guard Andrew Voorhees, and defensive lineman Tuli Tuipulotu. Named to the third team were center Brett Nealon and corner Mekhi Blackman. On Saturday night, the expected became the reality in New York City as Trojans quarterback Caleb Williams became the Trojans' 8th Heisman Trophy winner. And on the portal side of things, the Trojans received 2 announced portal commitments over the weekend from 2022 All Pac-12 first-team punter Eddie Saplichky, formerly of Arizona State, and former Georgia State outside linebacker Jamil Mohammed, who is 6'2", 245. The latest of the USC outgoing transfers in the portal recently was defensive lineman Kobe Pepe. He joined previously announced linebacker Raylan Goforth, rush ends Julian Simon and Taylor Katoa, and safety Xavion Alfred. Friends, WeAreSC's Inside the Trojan Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership, and we encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click on the red subscriber and like buttons. It's greatly valued, and it's free. And as a courtesy reminder for those of you that are not currently a subscriber member of WeAreSC.com, right now for $10, you can access all the WeAreSC premium stories, analysis, and videos. The current new member deal gives you complete coverage throughout this season, the bowl games, recruiting, spring football, all the way up to next season's WeAreSC.com cycle, which ends on August 31st, 2023. All right, there's the bell, which means we kick off the first quarter. And panel, here we are with the following topics. First of all, your overall thoughts on Caleb Williams winning USC's 8th Heisman Trophy. Our leadoff hitter, as always, Marc Kulkin. Your overall thoughts at Caleb getting the big prize in college football.
Oh, besides being, stoked and excited and being proud to claim that USC actually has 8 Heisman Trophy awards. Greg, you now have to admit it and accept it as well.
Whoa.
You'll have plenty of time to respond, Greg.
I am going to say this. Let me, since you brought it up, I just want to just comment very quickly. I am not avoiding saying that they do have 8 winning Heisman Trophy winners. Okay. 8 winning Heisman Trophy winners. You may proceed.
I love your semantical game. You did great. But besides that, and Caleb represented himself and the university to the best. But besides all that, it was kind of anticlimactic. I mean, we all knew he was winning the award. So it was just kind of like, all right, let's get to the acceptance speech so we can have Caleb show everybody who he is off the field. And it was a great acceptance speech. I mean, he got everybody involved, including the other finalists. So, besides that, we got to see former Trojans up there as well who won the award. So it was a great infomercial. And, being only a true sophomore, coming back next year, there's a good chance he'll be in New York as a finalist as well.
Chris, what was your overall thoughts when you saw him win the award?
Yeah, I mean, it was nice. It was nice that it happened, not only because he's a USC guy, but because he so clearly deserved it. I mean, really did. There's no way you can make an argument that the second place finisher, the TCU quarterback, is in the same class. He's not. The TCU kid probably knows that. So he deserved it. And, there are going to be all kinds of benefits to Caleb Williams and to USC as a result of this. I mean, it's strange that a college football award is the most prestigious award in sports, but I think it is. I mean, NBA MVP and NFL MVP might be bigger deals because you're talking about winning the MVP award for a major professional sport. But nobody talks about that. You win the Heisman, I don't even know how many times Peyton Manning won the NFL MVP, for example. I'm sure it happened, but I don't know. Nobody cares. But the Heisman, everybody cares. It's a big, big deal. And it's gonna be beneficial to him for the rest of his life. It's going to be beneficial to USC. We'll probably talk about this a little bit when we talk about recruiting and the like. But Caleb Williams, not just because of the Heisman, but in part because of it, Caleb Williams is going to be the most famous college football player since Tim Tebow. I mean, he's going to be enormously big next year. And we'll talk a little bit about that, I think, later in the show, and I'm going to talk about it in my own show. But that's a big deal for the program. And so, yeah, it was a good night, and it was nice to have that night after the disappointment of the Utah game. And frankly, the Utah game proved, if nothing else, usually a loss hurts a Heisman candidate's chances, but that loss just made it obvious. When Caleb was healthy, USC was dominating the football game. When Caleb runs for 60 yards and hurts himself and can't move anymore, when he can't be Caleb Williams anymore, the wheels absolutely fell off the wagon. I mean, it was so stark, the difference between USC with Caleb Williams and USC with a guy who's not really Caleb Williams. It was, anybody watching that game, I think, had to recognize this is the best player in the country, and he is. So it was good.
Yeah, I have to say that even though all signs pointed to him winning it, just the anticipation for me personally to watch not only just him winning it, but just how he handled winning it, which we'll go to in a second here. But, this is really almost going according to the script from the moment he transferred into USC, why he came to, obviously he came because of Lincoln Riley, no doubt about that, but he came into a city which is renowned for stars. I mean, when you got to sit there and look at buildings and see LeBron's picture, or you see some of the others that sports icons, even some of them through history. You could go to Canner's Delicatessen and on the side wall is a picture of a painting of Sandy Koufax. I mean, once you are considered a legend in this town, you can live off of that for a long, long time. And the fact that he was able to accomplish it with all these expectations, that's what I think was the key. And I agree with Chris. He lost, his mobility in the Pac-12 championship game, but he won the admiration of everyone, seeing that not only was he a great player, of course, but he would play in pain. He was willing himself to do it. It distracted from the loss in just a small way that this guy is a winner through and through. And when you start saying, well, where is his flaws? Well, most people would say, well, maybe it's a character flaw there somewhere, but there doesn't appear to be. You just really have to marvel at how he's handled the whole thing from the beginning of the transfer to this ultimate individual award. And, I think that takes us to the second question. Panel, what stood out to you regarding Caleb's acceptance speech? Mark, what got you?
I loved how he kind of made the ultimatum that either his 8 offensive linemen get to go or he doesn't go. And you pointed out before the show, who stepped up and made that possible. So I thought that was outstanding on Caleb's part. That's they pointed that out during the ceremony. That was kind of unheard of. So for him to make sure that those 8 players who played a part in protecting him all season got to be involved in that, to me, that was really, really cool. Also, I pointed out earlier, I loved how he mentioned the other 3 finalists, pointing out, hey, you know what? I might be winning this award, but you guys get to play in the playoffs, and I'm not. That showed a lot of class on his part, and as competitive as he is, that probably hurt a little bit to have to say that. And then also, I loved at the end, pretty much his Breakfast Club letter that he wrote. To me, that hit home a little more personally, because I can relate to that to a movie that I loved. And it's just the letter that he wrote, and it was different stages of his life and what made him who he is today. And so for him to be that introspective and to be able to reflect back and talk to future members of maybe another Breakfast Club, I thought it was great. Nice, passionate speech.
Chris, how did you perceive the speech to be?
Long, for one thing. And surprisingly so. I don't know that, and maybe, look, I hope that people stuck it out and listened to the full 15 minutes. If the Ohio State kid had won and he had spoken for 15 minutes, I would have turned it off. But I hope people listen to it, because I do think he showed some aspects of his personality that are worth knowing. I mean, he was, for a guy who is unbelievably talented and unbelievably confident, he was also humble in accepting the award and in thanking the people who had made it possible. And it's easy to see when you listen to him. It's easy to see how he could so quickly become the leader of that football team. You were hearing very early on that Caleb was the undisputed leader, and you'd hear things during the course of, during the past year, giving the gifts to teammates and the like, and you could tell that he got it. But you listen to him up there, and if I'm a teammate of his, I listen to that speech, and it's not all me. It's, thank you to Coach Riley, thank you to Coach Riley's wife, thank you to offensive linemen, thank you to my teammates. It was nice. It really was. And he seems like a good kid. That's nice, right? I mean, in a day when so many sports stars are difficult to like on a personal level, he's pretty easy to like on a personal level. He seemed like a good kid. So it was all great. And the other thing that stood out to me is twice he mentioned unfinished business.
Yeah.
And we all know what that means. This is a guy who is determined to win a national championship at USC. And if they get him a handful of defensive linemen in the portal this year, he's probably going to do it. Because if you have a defense that is even a top 30 defense, I'm not betting against him against anybody. So he's driven to achieve more than he's already achieved, and that's a good sign for USC fans.
But not to make a comparison to Matt Barkley, but we heard that unfinished business line before, after a strong 10-2 season. So let's just got to be careful there.
No, that's fair. I mean, but
because I heard it too. I heard it too, and I agree with you. A lot to look forward to.
Yeah, and Matt Barkley was a great Trojan and a good football player. He wasn't that guy. He wasn't that guy.
Lincoln Riley wasn't his coach either.
No. So anyway, it'll be fun to watch him next year.
Well, I was especially touched at certain parts of the speech. Yes, it was long, but I said to myself, what is he saying that I would have said, you didn't have to say that, or you could have shortened it up? There was nothing in that speech, in my opinion, that could have been or should have been cut out. He wanted to touch all his bases, and he did. I think what struck me, and you see this sometimes, and it's a real appreciation, having been a high school coach for almost 30 years, that he acknowledged his high school coach. and some of the people that were really at the foundational level. It means a great deal to a high school coach. Sometimes the player will acknowledge his college coach, which is understandable, but he was intent on really getting down to his roots. And I had heard him talk in the media Heisman Day on Saturday, and I had heard him actually in a conversation where he was actually breaking down. They had his mother and his father on the stage, and his mother especially is very emotional for him, and it was hard for him to get the words out. In fact, he even said, "I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get the words out when I'm speaking the speech." And he handled himself with great care in trying to touch everybody. As far as the unfinished business, I have no problem with that. I knew Matt Barkley pretty well, and he was a great kid, and he meant it. He wanted to fulfill a national title, and who amongst us would not want a player to say that? Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen, but to me, you understand that he's such a team player, and yes, having those linemen there was a big deal. I'm surprised that somebody hasn't done that before if you're a quarterback, but the fact that he was, I don't know if I want to use the word blackmail, but telling him I'm not going to show up. But you know what? The bottom line is they did show up, and he had as much to do with, his success as his linemen did. He bailed them out many times, but he appreciated that those were the guys who were trying to protect him, and he showed it. All in all, I thought if I was grading a speech, I definitely would give it an A. All right, let's move on here. Excuse me. The panel ESPN MC Chris Fowler said USC now has 8 Heisman Trophy winners, a record breaker, and acknowledging that Reggie Bush is part of the 8 winners. Do you think it was Caleb's place to make a political statement urging the Heisman Trust to return Bush's Heisman Trophy back to him? Mark, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't think politics has anything to do with it, but yeah, I really would have enjoyed hearing Caleb use his leverage, his blackmailing skills to point it out. Say, hey, you know what? I was able to hang out here with Carson Palmer and Mike Garrett and Matt Leinart, and it would have been great if Reggie Bush was here too. So just that type of just slide in a little bit of a comment. And I almost got the impression pre-game, so to speak, that he was told not to mention it, to kind of keep it on the down low. When he gave the comment, it's not up to me type of thing. That's just such a canned statement that it's like, all right, you know what? That's not you. Someone actually probably encouraged you to say it that way. So yes, long story short, I wish he would have said something. Absolutely.
Chris, how do you feel? Do you think he should have said something?
I don't know that that's his job. I mean, I don't know how well he knows Reggie. I don't know how well he knows the situation. I think he was probably in first grade or so when the penalties came down, and barely born when Reggie was playing. I do think I don't know if you guys remember, but Mike Bone at Salute to Troy made a comment about how he thought they were real close to getting that trophy back, which I don't think is something you say publicly unless there's stuff going on behind the scenes. The fact that Chris Fowler said 8 on 2 different occasions, ESPN has some understanding. I think it's just a matter of time before the trophy's returned. And the truth is, if you ask the 32 former winners on the stage, I think they would unanimously say that Reggie should have his trophy. Not because Reggie's behavior was perfect, either at the time he was playing or subsequent to the thing coming out, but just because all 32 of those guys also know that they also got improper benefits, and everybody has. So it's ridiculous. And it's ridiculous. So he'll get it back, and he should, but it was certainly nice to hear Fowler say it.
I think that Caleb handled it the right way. I agree that he probably wasn't what he was maybe really thinking, but this was a night for Caleb Williams. It was a night, not a night for politics, in my opinion, and no one gets into politics better than I do. But I think for him, I think he answered it the right way. This was not the forum to discuss that. So I appreciated that he moved on. I don't think Chris Fowler was wrong in saying that SC has won 8 Heisman Trophy winners, because in the ballot box, he did win it. There's no question. That's not even an argument. What he did to get his trophy taken away, you can argue that for all you want to argue it for. But for that moment, I thought that Caleb did the right thing for the right moment. Well, I'll just say that. All right, panel, in the modern USC football era, where does Caleb rank among Trojan quarterbacks at this time? Is he the best USC quarterback ever, or is it too early to make that evaluation, Mark?
One last thing on that. It's just the hypocrisy of the whole thing. If USC is going to be able to bring Reggie back into the fold, into the locker room, and they're going to talk about USC winning 8, then just say his name. Let's not, pretend like, oh, we're not breaking the rule. Just say his name if you're going to say they have 8. That's all I'm going to say on the matter. Now, as far as quarterback, he's got a skill set that USC's never had before, quarterback. The closest skill set physically, and this is a reach, is Carson Palmer. I mean, people forget how big and fast and strong Carson was before, injuries started to take hold of him. So as far as where Caleb will be in the pantheon of USC quarterbacks, he's on a chart to be the best. But, if you're looking at, who won championships, Matt Leinart, he's got a couple of them in his back pocket. Sam Darnold was good for a year. You had Rodney Peete. You can go back years and years, but USC has never seen a quarterback like Caleb Williams before, not even close. And like I said, to me, Carson Palmer is the closest physically with skills that you could even match up with Caleb when they were in college.
Chris, you agree with that?
Look, Matt Leinart has the best resume still. Matt Leinart arguably has the best resume of any college quarterback in history.
Yep.
Right? Two national titles, and then a second place finish where Leinart played really well, especially in the second half, and just lost to a great team at the last second. Yeah. A Heisman Trophy is of his own, and he was a finalist another time. That's 39-2 or whatever, 37-2, whatever the record was. That's the best resume of any quarterback in USC history. That means, and Matt Leinart was a fantastic football player.
Yep.
That being said, if I'm a defensive coordinator and you tell me, all right, here's your choice, you can either try to figure out how to defend Caleb Williams or Matt Leinart. I know which one I'm choosing. And Matt Leinart also knows which one he's choosing. Caleb Williams does things that not just no USC quarterback, but very few players in college football history can do. Yeah. And so you can imagine if you had to pick a quarterback right now to play that Texas Rose Bowl game, as great as Leinart was that night, would I put Leinart on that team or would I put Caleb Williams on the team? I'm putting Caleb Williams on that team every second, every time that's asked, because he can do things. He can do things that nobody else can do. I mean, and if you can imagine, with the talent and the offensive line he had around him, an offense that was already unstoppable, when you add Caleb Williams' ability to move around, to avoid sacks. He's the most talented quarterback in USC history. For one game, I would take him over anybody in USC history. But Matt still has the resume and probably always will.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. I would suggest that by my age, there is a quarterback that I think could have done what he did, not exactly what he did, but going back to the John McKay's first national championship team with Pete Beathard. Pete Beathard was a tremendous quarterback. Really, I mean, he played both ways. He could really move. In those days, you would have quarterback sweeps, things of that nature. He's the most maneuverable. I would not personally compare Caleb Williams to Carson Palmer. They're two different quarterbacks. Carson was the picture perfect pocket passer. Caleb is like, the worst thing that you can have with Caleb is an unscheduled play. He can neutralize a great defense. And I think part of the problem, I think, for Georgia, well, it's not actually a problem. It was a problem solved. When SC didn't win to go into the playoffs to play Georgia, a lot of people from the Georgia side were saying that they were really concerned about playing Caleb Williams because that's the type of quarterback that has beaten them in the past. I think that Matt Leinart by far is the number one quarterback in terms of his resume. I don't think there even should be an argument. But I do agree that if you put Matt Leinart, take him out and put Caleb Williams in against Texas, that would have been a hell of a challenge for Texas to try to corral him, especially with those weapons around him. But it's a good conversation piece. My hope is that they can win the national championship, and then you can really take away one of the things that he didn't do while he was at SC. All right, last question here in the first quarter. How will Caleb Williams winning the Heisman Trophy affect recruiting in the future? Mark, how's it going to affect recruiting?
It's not going to hurt. I mean, it's only going to be a positive. I don't know if there's any other answer than it's going to be a positive, especially as long as Lincoln Riley is coaching the quarterback. So anticipate future Heismans.
Now, are you saying this strictly as far as terms of effective recruiting in the future? You're talking about quarterbacks in general or just players in general coming because of Caleb Williams?
Both. I mean, it's both. I mean, players want to play with the Caleb Williams. So, when you have dynamic players, you get other types of dynamic players that want to play with each other. So, yeah, I think it works hand in hand together.
Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there are a few different aspects to this. Number one is Lincoln Riley's unbelievable run. When you look at it, I mean, basically every quarterback he's had as a head coach has finished at least second in the Heisman Trophy voting and has become an NFL starter. I mean, that's amazing. And that, I'm assuming, of course, that Caleb Williams is going to be an NFL starter, but I think we already know that's going to happen. What does that mean? That means that it doesn't mean that every quarterback is going to come to USC. Some of these kids will do what they're going to do for other reasons. Stay close to home, a team they've always loved, NIL deals they can't pass up, whatever. Here's what it does mean, though, that if you're a top quarterback, you are going to look at USC as long as Lincoln Riley's here, because you know that he makes people stars. And it also means, because all four of those guys were transfers, it means that even if USC misses out on the high school quarterback that they want, USC is never going to be in a position where they don't have a quarterback on that roster, because you can guarantee that there will be somebody, a sophomore, a junior, somebody out there that's a really good football player that would love the opportunity to come and play on a much bigger stage, maybe win the Heisman Trophy and get coached up by the very best there is. So I think Caleb winning the Heisman is a huge feather in Lincoln Riley's cap, number one, and that's going to have significant repercussions. Number two, short-term recruiting, especially in the portal. I mean, Caleb Williams is a guy that everybody in college football recognizes is the best player in the country, will be the best player in the country next year, and will go on to become a Patrick Holmes, Josh Allen type in the NFL. And that means that when Caleb is recruiting these guys out of the portal, if he's trying to find a couple of linebackers and a couple of defensive linemen, the pitch to these guys is, I'm coming back next year because I want to win the national championship. And we're going to score 50 points a game. What I need a handful of guys that can come in and wreak havoc up front on the defensive side for us. That's what I need. You give me 4 guys like that, we're going to get a national championship. That's a pretty good recruiting pitch in the portal. And I'd be stunned if it didn't work. I think there are a lot of guys who would love the opportunity to play with Caleb Williams. And they're not going, if you go to Georgia as a defensive transfer guy, you still may have to fight for playing time. The reality, though, if you're a stud defensive lineman, you're not fighting for playing time at USC. They're going to plug you in. You're going to do your thing, and you're going to, and if you do it well, you're going to win 12 games. I mean, that's what people are going to see. So in the short term, I think it's going to help that way. Over the long term, we haven't seen the benefit of Caleb Williams yet. We're going to see it next year when every trip to an opposing stadium is like the Beatles showing up. That's what that's what it's going to be like. You guys remember what it was like in 2005. It wasn't that way in 2004. I mean, Leinart and Bush, these guys, they were well-known football players, but it wasn't until 2005 that it was like, it's like a circus, a 3-wing circus everywhere they go. And everybody loves these guys or hates these guys, but everybody's talking about them, everybody's watching them. That's what Caleb Williams next year is going to be like. And what happens is there are going to be kids all over the country, not just in Southern California, that become USC football fans because they want to be Caleb Williams. And he's the biggest star, and he's going to be the biggest star in a long time in college football. That's going to pay dividends for about the next decade. And I suspect Lincoln Riley knows that, and I think Mike Bone and the USC administration know that, and I think they're going to take full advantage. He is going to be everywhere, and that's going to matter. They're going to be kids. They're going to be kids in Louisiana that become USC football fans next year because of Caleb Williams, and that's going to be nice 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now when those kids are superstars. And USC is one of the places they absolutely have to visit because they grew up big fans. That's what's going to happen. That's great.
No, I think you're 100% correct. By the time Caleb goes to the camps and is a camp counselor at, let's say, Elite 11 or some of these other places, the contact he will have with other quarterbacks and other players, he'll be, like you said, he'll be a one-man Beatles. And his effect, I think, is so long-lasting. Look, you're talking about Reggie Bush, and he hasn't played for a win. How long? And they're still talking about him. They're still saying, I'm going to SC because I want to be number 5. I think it's endless. And from this point on, I don't know if he's going to play in the Cotton Bowl. We'll talk about that a little later. But from this point on, he'll understand what being a Heisman Trophy winner is. I think those people on stage that were Heisman Trophy winners, they know what that means. He's just getting started. I think the biggest thing it will be is when, I think, Chris, you mentioned it, when kids around the country are wearing number 13 jerseys with USC, those are walking billboards for USC. And I think it's priceless, totally priceless. All right.
Let's just to, I hate to be the wet blanket here, but,
No, you don't. You love being the wet blanket.
Well, no, Chris brought up 2005 and how it turned into, a whole Beatles concert, following type of thing. And it was. But let's remember, there was also a 34-game winning streak mixed in there. Reggie Bush was the third, or about to be the third, Heisman winner in a 4-year period. So all of that kind of built up, to crescendo to what, we're talking about Caleb doing next year. USC hasn't won diddly yet, other than a Heisman. So, yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. I'm not so sold on these high school Elite 11 camps because I think things are trending a little bit differently now because of the transfer portal. So while everything that Chris said is correct and accurate, I think there's a little bit more involved there. And for me, the bottom line is USC still hasn't won anything besides a Heisman. It's kind of like 2002 right now. Let's see what happens next year. Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams, they have an advantage that Pete Carroll didn't have. They have the transfer portal. Let's see if that materializes.
Yeah, look, there's no question that USC hasn't won the way they had won by the time it gets to 2005. My point's a little bit different. The point I'm making is every kid who follows high school or every kid who follows college football or the NFL next year is going to hear nonstop about Caleb Williams, and not just his name, they're going to be seeing these highlights. The highlights are going to be insane. Guys, we know because we watch what he does on a weekly basis. And every time they're talking about the NFL draft, every game you're watching where there's a team that needs a quarterback, Caleb Williams' name is going to come up. He is going to be everywhere. He is going to be by far the biggest star in college football. And it won't be close. Whoever number 2 is, and we don't even know who number 2 is, because all the guys who would be number 2, they're all going to the NFL this year. The guy who's number 2 is going to be so far behind Caleb Williams in terms of the spotlight and how much people are talking about him and the number of viral videos that are going around showing his latest highlights. All I'm saying is that can't help but affect the way high school players, junior high players, elementary school players see USC. Those kids, you're going to have a huge number of kids that worship Caleb Williams because he is extraordinary, and they won't be able to look anywhere on their television sets without seeing him. That's the only point I'm making. For USC to win it all, they're going to need to get some. They need to get some help on defense, especially the front seven. We all know that. But he's going to have a major impact on their recruiting for the next decade.
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Well, let's move on to the second quarter. Panel Tuli Tuipulotu has been making some prestigious All-America teams, the latest being First Team Associated Press. Where would you rank Tuli in the pecking order of past great USC defensive linemen? Chris, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I mean, he's an excellent player. He deserves his first team All-American accolades. 5 years from now, when you talk about the best defensive lineman in USC history, his name will be mentioned, but his name will be mentioned 10th or 15th. That's the reality. Tuli was a very, very productive player. I don't want to take anything away from him, but he's not the best defensive lineman I've seen at USC. And he didn't dominate games the way some USC defensive linemen in the past dominated games. He didn't. So great football player, great Trojan, thrilled to death that he's getting the accolades that he's getting. He deserves them. But nobody's going to say he's the best that ever played at this school. They're just not.
Mark, where does he rank in your book?
He'll be somewhere in the top 15, 20, I would imagine. I mean, are you going to choose him above, Leonard Williams, Sean Cody,
Mike Patterson,
Willie McGinnis? There's just so many.
Kim Ryan, Dan Owens. No.
Like I said, keep going, Chris. I was trying to off the top of my head. So Tuli is a great player.
Yep.
And unless he's going to be a second round or a higher pick, I would encourage USC's NIL people to make an offer. Stick around for another year.
Well, I think that Tuli has done a remarkable job considering he's on a horrible defense. Not because of effort. They just are not very good. They're not very good at tackling. And they tried to move him all over the place to free him up, which they didn't do with many of their great defensive linemen in the past, mainly because they didn't have to. So in some ways, he was stuck out on the edge. He was stuck in the middle. He was stuck as a linebacker. He was stuck all over the place. And he's not exactly, true to himself, he's a humble guy. He's not the person that's going to call attention to himself. In my book, it's hard to imagine that there was anybody better than Leonard Williams, and I've seen them all. And Leonard Williams was in a class all by himself. There's been other great, you could debate, Dan Owens, formerly of La Habra High School. There were so many good ones to very good ones to great ones. Tuli will be in that 15 to 20 range. He'll get his picture bronzed or whatever they do, and it'll be on the side of the wall leading from the locker room up to the practice field. He will be well recognized, well deserved. And just the fact that you even mention him in discussions, who knows what's going to happen when he goes to the NFL? Maybe when he's on a team that surrounds him with other great players, it'll free him up to do some of the things that maybe we didn't see at USC. But definitely a person who's coming away out of college with almost every possible honor from all Pac-12 player to nearly consensus All-American. So he had a great career. Hopefully we get to see him in the Cotton Bowl. We'll talk about that in a second. How will the accolades bestowed upon Tuli Tuipulotu affect defensive line recruiting going forward? And we could take this question and approach it for the cycle of transfers potential coming in now. Chris, how will what has been bestowed upon Tuli in terms of recognition play towards a player that they're trying to bring in for 2023?
Well, I mean, one of the things that programs try to sell to recruits is that we've developed guys in the past that were superstars, and we can do that for you, right? So anytime you have a guy who has that kind of success, first team All-American, it's going to help. It's going to give Sean Nua and Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley something to talk about. That helps. I think it probably also helps in the short term, where USC is telling guys in the portal, we just lost the one guy we could count on to get to the quarterback. You know we're going to score a ton of points. We have a spot for you. You can make the difference between a team being 10-2 and a team winning a national title. And I think that could be a compelling sales pitch for some people. But Tuli is not the level of star that's going to dramatically change how people see your program. He's not Caleb Williams. He's not Reggie Bush. So I think it gives the coaching staff something to talk about. I think they'll take advantage, but I don't know that it's going to be a watershed moment in USC history.
Mark?
Yeah, Chris touched on it with Sean Nua. He gets to, Coach Nua's, coaching up and recruiting that position, we're assuming. So he could say, hey, you know what? I had Aiden Hutchin when I was at Michigan. Look what I developed him into. I had Tuli for 1 year. Look what he developed into. So from that point, Tuli is just he's another feather that Sean Nua can say, hey, you know what? I took somebody who's got a lot of good skill sets, but this is what I can turn you into. And whether or not it's going to, you're going to get another number one defensive player in the country type of player to come to USC. I don't know if Tuli has that kind of, gravitas, but I think him working with Nua, that together is a good recruiting tool, especially if you're trying to bring somebody in through the transfer portal, someone who's just trying to elevate themselves for the NFL draft. They just need another year or maybe 2 years to kind of show who they are, coming from maybe a Georgia State type of program.
Well, I think that Tuli is the type of player that is known probably to defensive linemen that follow such things. They will see that he became an All-American.
Yep.
I think Mark pointed out really well the history of Nua now as a defensive line coach. He's got a lot to sell. I think that Tuli, you can be on a team that could go to the national title. There's a lot of things that they can throw at somebody that might be thinking of coming to USC. And I think it will affect defensive line recruiting. And I'm looking at defensive line recruiting in Southern California. You can take a look at the defensive linemen that are available. I'm thinking of one that is at St. John Bosco that wears number 11. And you have to wonder if Tuli, being an All-American like he is, a guy like Ugulele at St. John might sit there and say, look, I can go to SC and get the same results as if I went to Ohio State, because we know that it's down to Ohio State, USC, and Oregon. So to me, the timing is just perfect if Mateo wants to come to USC. There's no negatives that you could say, well, if you go there, you're not going to get this, that, and the other thing. All right, let's finish up the second quarter with assuming that Tuli elects to go to the NFL draft this spring. What round will he be taken and why, Chris?
You know, I follow these not closely, but I look at these NFL first round draft projections. You don't see Tuli's name in there. I assume that means he's probably likely to be a second round pick. A lot of that's going to depend on what he does at the combine or at the at pro day, right? Because the NFL cares not only about production, they care not only about heart, but they really care a lot about how big you are, how strong you are, how fast you are, how quick you are, right? They're trying to project to the next level. And I have no idea how he's going to perform on any of those things. So if he wows people with his athleticism, he's going to be a first round pick. If he disappoints with his athleticism, he may fall to the third round. That's just the way the NFL is. So, and I have no idea, because I would be completely speculating if we're talking about his 40 time and his shuttle time and stuff like that. I don't know.
Mark, where's he going in the draft?
Yeah, he's not a first round draft pick right now, because of exactly what Chris said. The NFL guys want to hang him up in the meat locker. They want to poke and prod and measure and do all the little things that, once the game starts, really doesn't matter that much. I know they look at the 40 time a lot and the quick twitch and that kind of stuff, because tenths of a second do make a difference in the NFL. But when you watch game film, you see what Tuli's all about. And I don't know if that's going to show up at the combine or USC's pro day. So again, I echo what Chris is saying. Until the NFL GMs and scouts see the technical aspect of who Tuli is, all they have is game film.
Yeah, they've got numbers. They'll get numbers. They'll get it from the combine. They'll get it from pro day. But I tell you what, it's hard to argue that this guy doesn't bring it on every down, and that's what the NFL wants, every down. And I think that he could surprise people. Now, if somebody takes him in the second round, that could be an idea that somebody says we can save a little bit of money here by taking him in the second round, because we don't think he's going to go in the first round. But he's going to make it. He's going to be in the NFL. He'll stay in there as long as he's healthy. And really, it's going to be that second contract anyway. If he doesn't really hit the first round, that's going to be the big deal. So, one way or another, he's going to be okay in the NFL, in my opinion. All right. Halftime. Questions and answers from our listeners, viewers. This one from Gilbert, AZ Trojan. He had actually two questions. One he added late, so I'm going to take the second one because I think we've answered one of the first ones. But he says, given the players that appear to be returning to USC for next season, do you think it will take more than just added depth players to be able to compete for a national championship? My understanding was that Riley and staff were going big game hunting in the portal to rebuild the defensive front seven. And now, looking at the players we've offered in the portal, I just don't see that this team would be able to compete with Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, etc., even if we receive commitments from every portal player that we've currently offered. What are your thoughts? Jump right in, guys.
Let me say, I'm not a recruiting expert. I follow this stuff online like the guys asking the questions do. But when he says all of the guys we've offered, he doesn't know what guys we've offered. He doesn't. We know some of it because sometimes these guys will come out and say it, but a lot of these transfer guys do not. So first of all, we don't know who they've offered. Second, it's actually somewhat difficult for us to figure out what to make of some of these guys because we haven't been watching them. We haven't been following their careers for 3 years like you do the top high school picks. I have no idea whether these guys can play. You look at a guy like the defensive tackle from Arizona, who was second team All Pac-10 2 years ago. He's over 300 pounds. Do I want a guy like that? Yes. Do I know whether he's going to be a superstar? I have no idea. But I suspect he's a big body who has shown in the past that he can make some plays. He's somebody that USC could use. But do they need people? Do they just need depth guys? No, they don't just need depth guys, because if Tuli goes and with Nick Figueroa gone, do they have anybody that I trust to actually cause disruption up front? Nope. not a single guy.
Yeah.
So obviously they need to land some guys in the portal that can do that. I just think that they almost certainly will, because it's too good a landing spot for guys right now to step right in and play on a team that's going to be a top 5 preseason team with the best offense in the country. That's not a bad spot for a defensive guy to land. So I think they're going to get some guys. I just don't know who they're going to be.
Yeah, they can't just take guys to take guys. Anybody who's coming in this year has to be ready to contribute. So, you see an offer go to a Kyrie Jackson at Alabama. That's somebody that is going to come in and compete for a starting job like a Mekhi Blackman. He's not coming in to be depth. So that's the type of impact player USC needs in the transfer portal. Forget just warm bodies. We had warm bodies. Warm bodies doesn't get it done.
Yeah, I think Mark is right. They can't just be looking at depth first. They got to be looking at frontline players like a Mekhi Blackman who can elevate where they are going, not where they've been. And we won't know that until maybe even after the bowl season is over. We're going to talk about the 2 portal windows in a little bit here, but I when I look at who they supposedly are going after, and again, a lot of players aren't going to say anything. I thought that Raylan Goforth was really an anomaly, that he would basically probably be starting in the Cotton Bowl if everyone was going well. And even if he wasn't, he was going to play a great deal. The fact that he would just, as soon as the season was over, go right into the portal was a little bit surprising, if not shocking in some ways. And we don't know if there's other players like that. I know one thing is going to be a very key thing for Lincoln Riley. It's going to be the character, the culture. Does this guy fit in with Caleb Williams? If Caleb says, I don't like with this guy, I don't get a good sense with this guy, that's all it will take for them to move on to a different direction. All right, question 2.
But by the way, one other point on that.
Yeah.
I didn't know who the heck Stevie T was a few years ago, right? No idea. He made an immense difference on the defensive line. Mekhi Blackman, I had heard the name, but if you asked me what kind of player he was, I wouldn't have known. I'm not paying attention to these things. And it's especially true when you're talking about, like an edge rusher from Coastal Carolina. Look, I have no idea what that kid can do. I do know when I'm watching NFL games on Sunday, there are a whole lot of guys from places like Coastal Carolina. So I don't know what to make of these guys. And you pick a guy who hasn't been a superstar somewhere else like Stevie T, doesn't mean he won't come in and be a real difference maker. I don't know what to make of it. I don't have a scouting department that's been looking at Coastal Carolina the last 2 years, so I don't know.
Well, the good news is SC does have a scouting department for transfers. And let's not forget that some of these players were known to Lincoln Riley, maybe not being recruited to Oklahoma, but might have been aware of them.
Yeah. Tyrone Delaney is a perfect example.
Okay. You can expound on that if you like a little bit.
Well, he knew him from Kansas State. He saw enough on film that they were like, you know what? That's a guy we need to offer. He came in, and to say he didn't have an impact would, I think would be naive.
It'd be unfair. I mean, he's not an All-American, and he's not going to be a first-round draft choice, but he's a guy who played a lot better than I think any of us expected him to play.
He's your Stevie T of this year, I guess.
He's not as good as Stevie T.
Oh, I was just going to say, Stevie T came in with more experience and played more, but he elevated the line when he was on the field.
Yeah, he played well, and I don't think anybody really expected that.
No.
All right, from Troy 70, any signs of offensive line visiting? Hope that offensive tackle transfer coming. Along that lines, we haven't really heard a great deal about offensive linemen. We've all been basically focusing on defensive linemen. But how many transfer guys do you think will come as offensive linemen?
I think they got to bring in at least 3. You got the high school kids coming in. You don't want them to play right away. I mean, heaven forbid you're throwing a freshman out there unless he's an All-American, which none of these guys are. They're not going to be ready. So you need to bring in 3 guys, especially interior guys, because you're losing Voorhees, you're losing Brett Nealon. We still don't know what's up with Justin Dietrich, whether he's coming or going, but we're going to assume that, you know, he's another guy who could leave. So they need to bring in experienced guys who can play on the inside.
I'm excited about the incoming freshman class, but there's no Winston Justice or Tyrone Smith in that group. There just isn't. So, you know, those guys are going to have to get in the weight room and practice for a couple of years before they're ready to contribute. I mean, you know, we know the one interior offensive lineman, the junior college guy that they're after. Whether they'll be able to land him or not, I don't know. I would expect that they'll get some offensive line help. But look, these things happen so fast. We don't have months and months of kids taking visits and putting everything on Instagram. You know, a guy will jump in the transfer portal and a few days later he'll be gone. And a lot of that's going to happen after the bowl game. So we're just not going to know. And everybody wants to know, and all the questions about what's going to happen. The answer is none of us have any idea, other than it's a really good landing spot for guys. It really is. This is a great opportunity for a couple of high-level offensive linemen and for some linebackers and some defensive linemen especially. It's a great opportunity. Because it's a great opportunity, I suspect they're going to have some success finding guys. But I think it's too early to tell you what's going to happen.
All right, from SC the one, from Orange County, from OC. Panel, which teams will be USC's main competition for the Pac-12 crown next season?
I'm going to go with Washington, especially if Michael Penix is coming back to play quarterback again.
He did say he was coming back.
Right. So, you know, Chris mentioned, you know, who's the next best quarterback in the country next year? Maybe him. Mm-hmm. So Washington, I think, will challenge until somebody knocks Utah off of their perch. Utah. And
dependent on whether Rising comes back. One would think he'd go to the NFL, but
until somebody knocks them off their perch, they are going to be there, as far as I'm concerned. Period.
I agree with you totally.
There's certainly been competition, although they haven't done very well at the Coliseum over the years.
True.
No, that's a good streak. We'd like to see.
There's a big difference. There's a big difference between playing them in Salt Lake City and playing them in LA. And here's the reality. If USC lands some some good front 7 guys in the transfer portal, USC will be a prohibitive favorite next year. That's the reality. They're going to be better than everybody else. Doesn't mean they're going to win all their games. Like we saw with Alabama, just because you're supposed to beat everybody doesn't mean that you will. But if USC gets some front 7 help, they are going to be the prohibitive favorite and should be. Utah's got to come here. Washington's a good football team, but they haven't done anything yet. Oregon, we'll see. We'll see if Bo Nix comes back. If Bo Nix comes back, Oregon is going to be a legitimate threat. I don't know if
he's eligible to come back.
Yeah, he's got another year if he wants it. So, you know, I mean, if he comes back, that Oregon's going to be a player, but USC will be the favorite in the conference if they do anything in the transfer portal defensively, and I think they're going to. So, what's the biggest competition for the Pac-12 crown? USC's defensive line. That's the biggest competition.
Now, SC, the one from OC, also had a second question. He says, are you bothered as I am at the disrespect being shown to Lincoln Riley in this conference? I mean, to not even be named co-coach of the year. I get that he put together a loaded roster, but isn't that part of coaching? Doesn't he get credit for building his team, transforming the culture and performance on the field, taking a 4-8 team to 11-2 and a NY6 bowl? Hey, Pac-12 coaches, jealous much? Personally, I'm not, I don't get into the coach of the year thing. I know how that works. I've been involved in that for a long time. Usually the team that wins it, the coach, generally speaking, is the coach of the year. that didn't happen in the Pac-12. We know that the co-coaches were Jonathan Smith and Caleb DeBoer. I thought they both did great jobs.
They're good coaches too.
Yeah, and they are good coaches.
Job.
And I couldn't say that anything other than, if they're going to pick one, it was nice that they actually did pick co-coaches of the year, because I thought there was 3 or 4 coaches you could have said really did a great job with what they had. And the fact is, I guess the coaches were voting on it, so you have to kind of respect what they think, but then coaches have jealousies too. I've seen a number of times where coaches don't want somebody else to win it, and they do it in spite. So I don't know. Were you guys bothered at Lincoln Riley not getting at least co-coach of the year?
Coaches aren't judged on that. Does anybody know how many times Nick Saban has been the SEC coach of the year? I have no idea. Nobody cares. It doesn't matter. Like, it's completely irrelevant. I don't know how many times Pete Carroll was Pac-12, Pac-10, I guess, at the time, coach of the year. I have no idea. It doesn't matter. That's not how coaches are judged. Lincoln Riley is going to be judged on whether or not he can win multiple national titles at USC. And if he does it, it doesn't matter that Jonathan Smith won Pac-12 coach of the year. It doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant to his career. It doesn't matter.
My answer is very specific for Barry. It is what it is.
There you go. How profound that was. All right. From Jaime in East LA. Do you think that Lincoln Riley's 2023 Trojans will be better than the current 2022 Trojans, and why?
Yes. Yes, they will be.
Why?
Because it usually takes a couple of years to fully implement this transition in terms of culture and work ethic, in terms of getting your roster together. Now, obviously, on the roster side, Lincoln Riley was able to do some things that you couldn't do in the past. But yes, because I'm convinced that he will find some big bodies up front, and he'll find some guys who can bring pressure off the edge. And if he does that, then the defense will be better. And the offense is going to be ridiculous. It's going to be ridiculous. It really is. Even if Jordan Addison decides to leave, and I think he will, they're still going to have an unbelievable collection of talented wide receiver. And don't forget, wide receiver and running back are probably the 2 easiest positions for a freshman to come in and be a superstar at. And USC has 2 really good freshman receivers. I mean, maybe 3, but a couple of really good freshman receivers that I think are going to play right away. Zachariah Branch is going to make plays from day one. He just is. He's unbelievable. So yeah, I think they're going to be better in 2023. Now, if they completely strike out in the portal, maybe not. But if they completely strike out in the portal, that just means the defense is going to be terrible next year and the offense is going to be great. Well, I've seen that show. That won't be much different from what we saw this year. So I think that it's likely they will be far better.
Mark, what do you think?
It all hinges on Caleb staying healthy. If Caleb stays healthy, regardless of what USC has on the offensive side of the ball or the defensive side of the ball, they will be better than they were this year. Again, Chris said, it takes a couple of years to get your system put in place. The culture's already been changed. Now it's a matter of, not building depth. It's putting in those impact players in those positions where USC has weaknesses. And obviously it's on the defensive side of the ball. So as long as Lincoln Riley's calling the shots, Caleb Williams is taking the snaps behind center, USC's in a good place, and their schedule sets up well next year as well. So there's enough balance in there to give them a strength of schedule, but at the same time, it's a manageable schedule. So yeah, if he stays healthy, doesn't pop a hamstring early, USC will be just fine, and they should be better next year.
I think they can be better next year, but I don't know if they'll have a better record. And that's because you've got 2 teams that were not on the schedule last year, this last current season, Washington and Oregon. One of those games will be up at Eugene. The Washington game down here will be with a guy who's going to get a lot of Heisman talk, Michael Penix, the quarterback for the Huskies. He's really good. And, when you have those 2 additions to the schedule, that's going to be challenging. There's a lot of open questions about can they restock? I mean, they being USC, restock on the offensive line. Obviously, the defensive line we've talked over and over again. So I'm not sure that they're going to have a better record, but they could have a better team. And I agree with Mark. You know, SC was very fortunate that Caleb Williams went through a season, basically regular season, without any key injury to knock him out. You know, the irony, of course, is that he pulls his hamstring on a non-contact play from the best that we can tell. So I'm going to reserve a little bit of over enthusiasm because I think it's going to be a real challenge next year. You know, Caleb's going to be a marked man, so on and so forth. So, all right, let's finish up.
Oh, hold on a second.
Yeah, sure.
What you say makes sense, except for playing at Oregon State and playing at Utah. Those are 2 very tough road games. Is USC going to have more than 2 tough road games next year? I don't think they're going.
It's their farewell. It's their swan song in the Pac-12. You never know how the schedule maker will set USC up.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you're going to have to play up in the Pacific Northwest against somebody that's really good, and you're going to have to play one of them at home, and that's a challenge. But you know, away at Utah and away at Oregon State, I think those two road games are as tough as anything USC is going to have to deal with next year. So, and somebody's still going to have to find a way to tackle Caleb Williams. I know he's going to be a marked man, but unless his hamstring goes, nobody can tackle the guy. I mean, you see defensive ends come through clean. Nobody even touches them to the backside. It just spins around. It's like, I don't know what's going on here. That you're not supposed to be able to do that. So I don't know. We'll see. I am not always the most optimistic guy in the world. I just think they're going to find some guys up front defensively. And if this becomes a top 30 defense, watch out.
And also I should add this. Let's not forget they're going to Notre Dame, and that'll be a circus unto itself. Yep. All right. Last question from Michael in Orcas Island, Washington. Do you think the rise of University of Washington football under Kalen DeBoer, will that affect USC's recruiting in the state of Washington? And will it become basically non-existent? Now, USC, for the record, I think it's 2 players that they have coming from the state of Washington. Will that evaporate as Washington gets better? What do you think?
You know, initially out of high school, maybe, but the transfer portal just changes the dynamics. I don't think it really matters anymore if you miss out on a guy initially. And state of Washington, how many players do they actually churn out annually that are what you would consider USC level type of players? So, you know, are you going to battle Washington for them? Sure.
It's harder to recruit in Washington when Washington is good. I'll concede that. But non-existent, Washington still isn't USC.
Right.
It's not. No, it's not going to be non-existent. USC will be able to pull players out of all kinds of places all around the country. And the truth is that Washington's going to be doing a lot more sniffing around in Southern California than USC is going to be doing in Washington. DeBoer's one's got his work cut out for him, not Lincoln Riley.
All right. Well, I think we've exhausted Tuesday's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. Reminder that Thursday's edition of Trojans Huddle will kick off the second half with the latest on USC topics and the upcoming Cotton Bowl. So until Thursday, a big thank you again to our panelists, Marc Kulkin and Chris Arledge. And a special thank you to all of you for watching or listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Hoping you're having a great week wherever you may be. Go Trojans. And until this Thursday, this is your moderator, Greg Katz, saying, beat Tulane and fight on, everybody.